Easily find all of our crochet tutorials. Type youtube.com/JaydaInStitches into your web browser and we'll see you there. Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. Winter is coming, and that means ice, snow, and really cold wind. But just because you have to bundle up doesn't mean that you can't still be elegant. And that brings us to today's tutorial. We are going to make ourselves an absolutely indulgent Gothic winter wrap. Winter because we're using a size 6 super bulky weight yarn, and Gothic because the pretty little edging we've worked along the edge is reminiscent of the spires of Gothic cathedrals, Gothic architecture. I went with black because I love the drama of it, but don't worry, today's tutorial is being filmed in a nice bright color. There are a lot of ways that you can wear a project like this, which is another reason that I love it. You can bundle up like a shawl, and that helps keep your chest, your upper back, and your shoulders really warm. So this is nice if you sort of are hanging around inside, or maybe it's a little breezy outside but not quite cold enough for a heavy coat yet. Or if you're milling around with folks and you're starting to warm up, you can drop it to your arms so that it drapes along the inside of your elbows, and this keeps your lower back and your kidneys warm. Very important this time of year. However, if you're going outside and winter has fully arrived, you can put your coat on and wrap this blanket scarf style all the way around your neck. Woo! Tuck those little ends in underneath your coat, and let me tell you, the winter winds are not getting through this. This project is 70 inches long by 20 inches wide, or 185 centimeters by 50 centimeters. But despite its magnificent size, it's actually quite quick to make. One, because we're using a big bulky weight yarn and a large hook, and two, because we're using the simplest of repeater patterns, and the whole point is to show off the yarn and less about the stitching. We gave it the pretty little edging to sort of finish it off nicely, and it's a nice change from fringe or tassels. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch ourselves up the most indulgent Gothic winter wrap. We're using a size 6 super bulky weight yarn for our Gothic wrap scarves today. This is lightly spun. You could also use a roving style yarn. You want something that has a little bit of texture or kind of interest to it. That's what's going to add interest and drama to your scarf. This is a 50-50 wool acrylic blend, so it also has a nice feel and a lot of strength. You want around 765 grams or about 550 yards of that size 6 bulky weight yarn. Now I made mine in black, but I'm going to be demonstrating today using red so you can see what I'm doing. You're also going to want a measuring tape, a yarn needle, a pair of scissors, and the hook we're using is nice and big. This is a 10mm hook, also known as an N or a 15 in the US, and the old UK measurement is a 000, so nice big hook for this project. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. Keep your hooks and tools handy with Lula and Gwen in this cute zippered pouch by your InStitches friends. Purchase a pouch and help out our show. The Teespring link can be found down below. The width of our wrap scarf is determined by our foundation chain row. I chained 41 for mine, and it measured an ultimate width of 21 inches or 52.5 centimeters. You can make yours wider, however, by chaining a foundation chain row that's any multiple of 4. We all want to begin with a slip knot on our hook, and then you can chain 41, like I did, 40 being the multiple of 4, plus 1 chain for turning on the end. So if you feel that once you get to 40 chains, it's not quite wide enough, continue chaining sets of 4 until you like the width measurement. This is why it's good to have a little measuring tape handy. And then once you're satisfied, chain 1 more chain for turning. We are using the single crochet stitch throughout, and that's why we're using a single turning chain. Once you have a foundation chain number that is any multiple of 4, add 1 extra chain for turning like I did, so I have 41 here. We're just going to skip that first chain from the hook. You never use your turning chain to crochet in. The whole purpose of the turning chain is just so you can turn with it. That's its sole reason for being, so always skip the first chain from the hook. And into the second chain from the hook, you're going to single crochet. We're using really bulky yarn, we're using a really big hook, so this might take a little adjustment if you're not used to using big hooks and thick yarn. So we're just using the single crochet stitch. If your first row or your foundation row looks a little wobbly, don't worry about it, because when we put on our edging, it will all even out. At the end of your first row, you'll have 40 stitches, like me, or if you did a custom number that's a multiple of 4, you'll have an exact multiple of 4. You'll have the same number of stitches in every single row throughout the entire build of this wrap. So for me, that's 40 stitches. At the end of every single row, chain 1 and turn your work. Remember, we do not use the chain for anything, it's just for turning. You always work into the first stitch. So here's the first stitch after that chain 1. So always ignore your turning chain and identify the first stitch. That's always kind of looks like the second chain from the hook. So that's how you know where to start your row. And we're going to be using the back loops only for the entire build of this scarf. And the back loop is always the loop that's furthest from you. So this guy over here. So instead of putting your hook underneath the entire thing, you're just going to be grabbing the loop that's furthest away. You're going to continue to single crochet, and then when you get to the next stitch, grab the back loop only, and it always looks like this no matter what row you're on. The back loop is always the loop furthest away from you no matter what row you're on. So now you can just turn your brain off. You're going to single crochet in the back loops only of every single stitch of every single row. Your row count will not change, so if you have 40 stitches in row 1 like me, you'll have 40 stitches in every single row. At the end of every row, you're going to chain 1, and that chain 1 just turns us around so that we're working back across the stitches. So ignore your turning chain and just single crochet using the back loops only in every stitch across. You're going to repeat this, so just put your feet up, turn your brain off, for at least 102 rows, or until you reach the target length of the wrap that you want. So another good reason to keep your measuring tape handy. You can just keep measuring. The target length is around 68 inches for me. And if you need to add a few rows, or maybe you're using a bigger hook or even thicker yarn and you get there a little sooner, that's fine too. You may not need as many rows, but it's the same stitch throughout. Single crochet, back loops only in every single stitch. I've worked several rows now using the back loops only and a single crochet, and now you can really see that fabulous stretchy ribbed effect that's happening. There's a definite bump, and it looks the same on both sides. And that's exactly how the whole thing is going to look. So like I said, you want to do this for 102 rows or until your scarf measures as long as you want it to. And that's how the entire pattern works out, which is why a nice thick bulky weight yarn and a really big hook takes this nice simple stitch pattern and turns it into something quite luxurious. When you get to your last row, row 102, or whatever the last row is, depending on how long you want your wrap to be, you're going to finish off your last row as normal, but instead of chaining 1, we're going to chain 3. So this is how we're going to work this really nifty edging on our scarves or our wraps, which reminds me of sort of Gothic architecture, this neat little kind of cathedral looking peaked window. So we chain 3 and we turn. This chain 3 is going to use this first stitch. So if you identify that first stitch, when we were single crocheting, this would have been the stitch we worked into. But our chain 3 is kind of a decorative thing, and it's going to use that stitch. So you're going to ignore that stitch, and you're going to focus instead on the next 2. We're no longer using the back loops only. We're going to use the whole stitch all the way across, and we're going to transition now to using a treble crochet 2 stitches together stitch. And it's nice and easy to demonstrate using a big hook and this big thick yarn. For a treble crochet, you yarn over your hook twice. We're skipping that first stitch, we're working into the next stitch, put your hook through the entire stitch and pick up a loop. So this is basically like working a regular old treble crochet. You'll have 4 loops on your hook at this point. Yarn over, pull back through 2 loops, yarn over, pull back through 2 loops. You'll have 2 loops left on your hook. We're going to move to the next loop now, and we're going to finish our treble crochet 2 stitches together in that second stitch. Yarn over your hook twice, insert your hook through that stitch and pick up a loop, yarn over, pull back through 2, yarn over, pull back through 2. So you'll have 3 loops left on your hook. There's that chain 3, there's 2 partly worked treble crochet stitches. That gives you 3 loops up top. You're going to yarn over and pull back through everything. So that is a treble crochet 2 stitches together. Before we leave, we're going to work a little picot, or that little pointed top to the cathedral window. We're going to chain 3, and you're going to slip stitch into the top of that treble crochet 2 together, but instead of going backwards and using that stitch, we're just going to use the little loop over here. So where we chained away, there's a little loop that kind of, all of your treble crochets look like they're kind of being held by it. Just slip your hook in there and slip stitch. So you're slip stitching into that loop that's sort of holding all 3 of those loops together, your chain 3 and your 2 treble crochets. Now we're going to chain 3, and we're going to exit this little window kind of like we started. Into the next stitch, you're going to put your hook through the whole thing and just slip stitch. And there is our little cathedral window with a little kind of nifty decorative peak on top of it. Let's do another one of those together. This is going to be a motif that you repeat all the way across this row. Into the next stitch, we're going to start by slip stitching into it to sort of begin our little window. We're going to chain 3, and that chain 3 is the decorative start to our window. It's kind of like a frame. Then we focus our attention on the next 2 stitches. So this stitch has been used. We're going to use the next 2 stitches and work a treble crochet 2 stitches together. Yarn over hook twice, pick up a loop in the first of those 2 stitches, yarn over, pull back through 2, yarn over, pull back through 2. That leaves us with 2 loops on our hook. Into the next stitch, yarn over hook twice, pick up a loop in that stitch, yarn over, back through 2, yarn over, back through 2. We've got 3 loops left on our hook, yarn over, and back through everything. Before we finish with the middle part of our window, we want to make sure that we put that nifty little peak on top. So we chain 3, whoops, and then come back down here and find that little loop that sort of looks like all of those loops are being held by. Slip your hook through it and slip stitch, and there's our little peak. Now we're going to close off our window just the way we started it. Chain 3, this is like the other frame, the frame on the other side of the window. Come down to that next stitch and slip stitch into it. So each of these little window motifs, these little cathedral windows, are worked across a set of 4 stitches. So there's 4 stitches used in each window, which means if you had 40 stitches across the end of your last row, like I did, you'll have 10 of these little windows. If you used a custom number of a multiple of 4 stitches, then you take that custom number, divide it by 4, and that's the number of window motifs you'll have across the edge. We'll do one more together and then I'll turn you loose. The window begins by slip stitching into the first of 4 stitches, chain 3, this acts like the window frame. Across the next 2 stitches, or the middle 2 stitches of the window, you work a treble crochet 2 stitches together. Chain 3 and slip stitch back into that little loop right at the bottom of the chain 3, and that creates the neat little kind of decorative peak to our window. And then finish the window with its second frame, which is 3 chains and a slip stitch into that 4th stitch. And that is your little cathedral window. You're going to repeat that all the way across, and I'll catch up with you at the end. Once you've worked that little repeating cathedral window motif all the way across, like I said, for every 4 stitches you have in your last row, you'll have 1 cathedral window motif. And then I just like to kind of grab the little peaks and pull them up, and that's what makes them sit up. Now, if you find that this is kind of rumply or crumply, you can always do a little light blocking afterwards, but the weight of the scarf is going to sort of let them fall down on their own, so don't worry about that too much. Then once you're finished, you can just fasten off, cut your yarn, pull that tail back through your last loop, and then weave your tail in back and forth across that last row of single crochet. And then we're going to do the other side. You're going to flip your entire cowl over so that you're working across the foundation chain row. Now, it doesn't matter if you start on the side that has your little tail or if you start on the opposite side, and you can weave in that short tail or work over top of it. I'm going to show you how it looks when you work over top of it. You're going to grab your yarn, you're going to make a slip knot, and of course we're repeating the exact same cathedral window motif pattern across the bottom here. It just might look a little different. So you're going to join your yarn with a slip stitch in that first edge stitch, which will be a foundation chain from that first row you did. So just join with a slip stitch. I like to pull that tail into the inside of the work, like pull it towards the work as opposed to out the other side, and that kind of turns the knot around and it keeps my edge nice and neat. And then from there, it's just exactly the same thing. You chain 3, we don't have to turn because we're already facing in the right direction. And then across those foundation chains, you work that little motif pattern. Yarn over twice, pick up a loop in the next foundation chain stitch, work 2/3 of a treble crochet stitch. And again, I'm working over top of my little short tails. Yarn over twice, find the next foundation chain stitch, and complete that treble crochet 2 stitches together. Chain 3, slip stitch back into that little loop at the bottom of the chain 3, chain 3 more. This is the other side, or the other side of the frame of our little window, and then slip stitch into the next foundation chain, keeping all those little tails in a line if you didn't already weave them in. And then you repeat. You slip stitch into the next foundation chain, chain 3, and this begins your next cathedral window. You can do this all the way across. It's exactly like the other side. And now I'm going to show you what it looks like on my finished wrap. So here is me putting that little cathedral window edging along my foundation row on my actual wrap. You're going to do what you did on the other side. Once you're finished, snip your yarn, I should say, and fasten off. And then you can weave that tail in back and forth underneath some of those stitches. So because I'm using a wool blend, this is pretty sort of grabby yarn, and if I just weave it in once going one way and then kind of double back and go the other direction once, I find it doesn't want to come undone. So you can sort of see how it looks. You can even use the slightly smaller, there we go. You can even sort of bisect some of the stitches with your little yarn needle. Gently pull that yarn all the way through. Don't pull too tight because you don't want to pull that last row out of alignment. I'm going to work a few more stitches here. There we go. Then I'm going to double back, so hop over top of that last stitch and just weave it back through the same set of stitches that I came through in the first place. And if there's any little tuft sticking out, I'll just trim it. So I'm going to keep my thumb on that because I don't want it to pull. And then there we go. There, all woven in. Then I'm going to go back across that row and I'm going to pull out the little edges. And we're all done. And now you have no excuse to be cold this winter. We hope you enjoyed stitching this lovely thing up along with us today, and we will see you soon here on the Jayda InStitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have a cozy week. Bye everyone!
Hi everybody! Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.